We've all been there. You hand your toddler the tablet or turn on a show because you just desperately need 15 minutes. Maybe you are trying to scramble together for dinner, answer a quick email, or honestly, just sit in silence to finish up some work that's been hanging over your head. And for a second, it's beautiful. They settle in, completely mesmerized, and totally still. It is without a doubt the most peaceful moment of your entire day. Until you make the mistake of saying the words every single parent dreads. Okay, time to turn it off. If this sounds all too familiar, you are definitely not alone. Welcome to Clever Cubs, where we break down toddlers' behavior without the parenting guilt. Hit that subscribe button, because today we're looking at what's actually happening inside a toddler's head during a screen tantrum. What happens next feels like a total overreaction to a tiny piece of plastic being put away. They just completely lose it. We're not talking about a little pouting or whining here. We are talking full-blown screaming, thrashing, absolute meltdowns. Probably the most intense emotional explosion they'll have all day. And as parents, our minds immediately jump to the worst. They're addicted. They're ungrateful. They just can't handle being told no. But the science shows it's actually none of those things. It's not a behavior problem or a character flaw. It's a direct biological reaction happening inside their brain. See, what's happening when your toddler is staring at a screen is completely different from when they're playing with blocks, looking at a book, or talking to you. From the outside, it looks passive. It looks totally harmless. But inside their brain, a massive trigger is going off. Screens are literally engineered to be hyper-stimulating. The rapid cuts, the flashing colors, the sudden sounds, the constant fast-paced movement, every single one of those changes is a tiny blast of novelty to a developing brain. And novelty triggers dopamine. Now, we usually think of dopamine as the reward chemical, but it's actually the pay attention to this right now chemical. When dopamine floods the brain, it tells the body to prioritize that one thing above everything else. And for a toddler whose brain is still learning how to focus, screens become this superpowered dopamine delivery system that real life just can't compete with. Dr. Jean Twenge and her team at San Diego State University spent decades tracking behavioral data across hundreds of thousands of toddlers to see exactly how this plays out. And what they found is eye-opening. The more time a child spends on screens, the more their brain starts depending on that extreme level of stimulation just to feel baseline engaged. Think about it from their perspective. By comparison, real life becomes incredibly boring. A parent's voice doesn't change every 2 seconds. A wooden toy doesn't have camera cuts, flashing lights, or sound effects. A normal conversation doesn't give them a rush of novelty every 3 seconds. When we introduce toddlers to heavy screen time, we're accidentally introducing them to a level of fast-paced stimulation that the real world just wasn't built to match. And here is what's actually happening inside their head. While your toddler is watching that screen, the prefrontal cortex, which is the front part of the brain responsible for impulse control and managing big emotions, basically goes to sleep. Meanwhile, their reward centers are firing on all cylinders, putting them in this state of pure passive consumption. The brain doesn't have to do any actual work to stay focused because the screen is doing all the heavy lifting for them. So when the screen suddenly goes dark, it causes a massive neurological crash. That huge dopamine spike drops off a cliff. The intense stimulation vanishes, and a brain that was just flying at 1,000 miles an hour is suddenly forced to completely reset and regulate itself on its own. For you or me as adults, that transition is just mildly annoying. But for a toddler whose brain is still under construction, it genuinely feels like an emergency. In fact, researchers at Boston Children's Hospital looked at these exact screen transitions in kids under 4. What they found is fascinating. The moment the screen turns off, there's a measurable physical spike in cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone. Let that sink in for a second. It is measurable. This isn't just your kid being dramatic or trying to push your buttons. Their body is going through a legitimate neurochemical shock. When they completely melt down, they aren't trying to be unreasonable. They are having an involuntary biological response to a world that suddenly got way too quiet, way too fast. To make matters worse, the brain adapts. The more a toddler gets used to that high-octane stimulation, the less responsive they become to the real world. Dr. Victoria Dunkley has spent years studying this, even coining a term for it, electronic screen syndrome. It's a whole cluster of symptoms seen in kids with heavy screen exposure, and one of her most consistent findings is that these kids struggle way more with everyday transitions, frustration, and just plain boredom. Their brains have literally been trained to expect a massive amount of input, so anything less than that actually feels like deprivation. There's also a weird physical reality about screens that makes walking away from them uniquely brutal for a toddler. Think about it. If they're playing with blocks and it's time to stop, they physically put the block down. If you're reading a book, there's a concrete action of closing the cover. There's a tangible shift. But with a screen, that vibrant moving world just vanishes into thin air. 1 second they have full color, sound, and a fast-paced story doing all the imagining for them. The next second, absolute nothingness. A toddler's brain hasn't developed the ability to instantly switch gears, entertain itself with abstract thoughts, or create its own internal narrative. The screen goes black, and they are suddenly staring into a cognitive void. This is exactly why the thing we instinctively do as parents, just turning it off and telling them to move on, backfires so spectacularly. From your toddler's perspective, the external anchor keeping them calm was just violently yanked away. Their brain crashed from 100 miles an hour to 0 in a split second, and their nervous system simply panics. So remember, that meltdown isn't a calculated manipulation to get their way. From where your toddler is sitting, it is a genuine neurological emergency. So, what actually works? It starts with realizing that a toddler coming off a screen is exactly like a toddler who's completely overstimulated by a loud birthday party or a chaotic playground. They don't need a lecture. They need co-regulation. They need their nervous system to come down gradually, rather than slamming face first into a wall. Researchers looking at successful screen transitions found that the absolute best approach is a warning-based transition. It's simple. You give them a heads up 5 minutes before, then 2 minutes, then 1 minute. This gives that developing brain a chance to brace itself for the shift, rather than experiencing the end of the show as a total ambush. It's not about negotiating or asking for permission. It's just working with their biology instead of against it. What you do right after the screen goes off matters just as much. If you shut down the tablet and instantly try to force them into a structured task, their fried brain is going to reject it. Instead, just sit with them for 2 minutes. Offer some physical closeness. Do something incredibly low-key together. Your calm presence acts as a stabilizing force, giving their dopamine system a safe runway to land on. Look, this isn't about saying screens are evil or that an occasional show will ruin your child's brain. Not at all. But it does mean realizing that if screens become a massive, constant part of their day, their tolerance for normal real-life stimulation is going to shrink. The real world just won't be able to compete. So in practice, be intentional. If you're going to use screens, try placing them toward the end of the day rather than right in the middle, so the transition isn't quite as jarring. Have a low-energy plan for what comes next. And most importantly, remember that the explosion you're seeing isn't your toddler being a brat. It's just a little brain crashing hard from a high-stimulation high. When you see it through that lens, you can stay calm yourself, hold the boundary, and just let the storm pass. Over time, as you ease up on the screen cycle, their nervous system will recalibrate. Real life will become engaging again. Your voice will be enough. A simple wooden toy will be interesting again. Not because you punished them, but because you gave their beautiful, developing brain a chance to catch up to the real world. How do you handle screen transitions in your house? Do warnings work for your little ones, or do you have a go-to trick that saves your sanity? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what's working for you. And if this video made you feel a little less guilty and a lot more equipped, hit that like button and subscribe to Clever Cubs for more honest science-backed parenting insights. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.